Alright, this video is meant to be pretty much a review of what you did last year. A lot of the stuff that you learned in ionic naming, molecular naming, you went through and was very thorough. So really I'm just going to highlight the stuff that you learned last year and go from there. So first and foremost, ionic naming. How do you know it's an ionic compound? Remember, an ionic compound is a metal plus a nonmetal. So when you look, if the first element, you should know where a metal is in the periodic table. It's on the left side of the staircase. If the first element is a metal, that means you're dealing with an ionic compound. Okay, so that's the first thing. You have to classify whether it's ionic or molecular, because I'm going over two naming systems in this video. And the first thing you do is you just name the metal, take the name right off the periodic table, you're good to go. Then you have to look at the second thing, whether the ion, the anion on the back end of it, can either be monatomic or polyatomic. What do I mean by that? Monatomic means only one type of element. So it's a binary compound, means it only has two elements because it has a monatomic element on the back side of it. Polyatomic has many, and that's what you named it from memory because you had to memorize all those polyatomic ions. This one you add the IDE. So really, when you look at them, here's some examples. So the first one right here. If I look, I know this is an ionic compound because sodium is a metal. So I'm just going to write the name. The name's going to be sodium right there. So I just write sodium. I just name it. The real key is when I get here is I have to look and see what this is. It's either going to be poly or mono. In this case, carbonate, there's two elements to it, so it's not binary. It's carbonate. It's one of the ones you had to memorize. So this becomes sodium carbonate. I just name it from memory. So when I look, I see that's a polyatomic ion. This is going to be, let me highlight. I'm going to highlight the polyatomic ions real quick because that's what I want to be aware of. That's a polyatomic ion, and that's it. There's no other polyatomic ion. So in green, if I look right there, one other element, so a total of two elements, two elements, two elements. So when I go through, one of the first things I have to do as a chemistry student, name it, is decide poly or mono. That's the first thing I'm looking at. Is it mono or poly? So then I come back here. Second one, Na, again, is sodium. So I'm just going to write sodium. I know it's ionic because it's a metal. Sodium. OH, well, it's polyatomic. I got to name it from memory. You should know that OH is hydroxide, so I write in hydroxide right there, and I'm done. Next one, I know it's ionic. Again, it's magnesium, so I'm just going to write magnesium. So I write out magnesium, write that out. The next thing I have to do is I realize it's only two elements, so the second element automatically goes to IDE. Bromine goes to bromide. So this is going to automatically get an IDE. This is going to get an IDE on the second element, IDE on the second element, IDE on the second element. So if you look, okay, is potassium. So this is going to be a potassium right here. Boom. That's going to be chlorine plus the ide because it's monatomic. So potassium chloride. That's all you're doing. The key to naming is recognizing poly or mono for ionic naming. Poly goes to your memorization over the summer. If it's mono, it's just you're slapping on an IDE at the end. Iron. Fe is iron. Cl is chloride. When you go with a transitional metal, there's an additional piece that you have to add. You have to add its charge. Because remember, multiple transition metals there's several transition metals that have multiple charges. Easy way for me to tell the charge is the subscript. I can pull back the crisscross, and I know this is iron too because of that. You look right here. Fe, iron, I know it's an ionic compound. It's binary because there's only two elements, so it's going to be iron chloride. Add that right there. Add the ide. This is iron Roman numeral 3. Because the charge that came from there when you crisscrossed or put the compound together was 3+, because it's Fe 3+. That should be review from last year. So we take a look right here. Let me see if I can slide this over. The recording area is a little weird. All right, so then we're going to look right here. Let me grab another pen. So if I look right here, Ga, gallium. Gallium goes right there. Poly or mono? That's poly. NO2 is nitride. Nitrite, whoops, my bad. Nitrite, ITE. I'm going to add, hold on, I'll get my pen back. So, trite. NO3 is nitrite. Silver. Ag is silver. I know it's ionic compound because it's a metal, so it's going to be silver right there. SO3 is sulfite. So it's silver sulfite is a polyatomic ion. So I just add it right there and I'm done. Silver always has a charge of +1, always, so it doesn't get a Roman numeral. NH4 is one of the ions you have to remember. It's the only polyatomic positive ion. That is ammonium. So I'm going to write ammonium right here. Ammonium, and then OH, polyatomic ion, hydroxide. So hydroxide, I just name it from memory. All these are going to be named from memory. If you look right there, Al is aluminum, so I write out aluminum. And then CN is cyanide, so I write cyanide, whatever, I think I spelled it wrong. Cyanide, whatever, close enough. And then beryllium, B is beryllium. Beryllium, and then that's acetate. Again, it is a polyatomic ion, so I am naming it from memory. Poly, mono. You have to be able to spot that. Then, covalent naming system. Covalent naming system, a covalent compound, remember, is always going to be a nonmetal and a nonmetal. How do you spot a covalent compound very easily? It begins with a nonmetal. Nonmetal first and a nonmetal second. All the covalent compounds we're going to name at the start of chemistry, pretty much the whole year, are always going to be binary. So it's going to be just two nonmetals from the right side of the periodic table. So what you're going to do is the first thing you do is you name the first element. Just name it. Second, you name the second element with an automatic IDE on the second element. So it's very similar to monatomic naming in ionic compounds. When you notice you start with a nonmetal, the first thing you do is you name the first element, second element, automatically IDE. The only difference is for covalent compounds, we use a system of prefixes to determine what number of atoms you have. Mono is 1, di is 2, tri is 3, tetra is 4, 5 for penta, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 10. Those are all the prefixes that you use. So when you look, here's an example of some covalent naming. If I notice before I even start, I know it's covalent naming because they're all nonmetals. Nitrogen's a nonmetal and silicon's a nonmetal, so they're all nonmetals. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to label my first element is nitrogen, so I write out nitrogen. My second element is fluorine, automatically IDE, nitrogen fluoride, right there. Then I got to add prefixes. We never add a prefix for the first element for mono. It's assumed there's one nitrogen just by writing the word nitrogen there. But notice how I have 3 fluorines, so it's nitrogen trifluoride. Next one, nitrogen. It's the first element. I just named the first element. I write nitrogen. Second element is oxygen, so it automatically goes to IDE. Nitrogen oxide. 2 is di, so I add the di there. 5 is penta. I drop the A if there's 2 vowels, so it's dinitrogen pentoxide. Next one, SiCO4. Si is silicone, so I go silicone right here. Then I'm going to go chloride, because ID on the second element. Chloride. And then I have 1 for this, so I'm good. And then the chloride is 4, so I'm going to add the prefix tetra. So it becomes silicone tetrachloride. The biggest thing you have to remember when you go to do the naming assignment tonight is first look. It starts with a metal. You name the metal. Then you decide poly or mono. From that point, you go. If it's a covalent compound, you just write the name of the first one, name of the second one with an IDE, and then add the prefixes representing the numbers. Just remember, no mono is used on the first element. That's a complete review of the two of the 3 naming systems that you have to know for this class. It should be a complete review because you should have definitely done it last year. All right? So there's a couple sheets on Edmodo. You need to complete those couple sheets. Get those things all done, turn those in the tray, and I will see you tomorrow. Have a good evening. Good evening.